All right. Well, hello, welcome to the Wikibrands Collective webcast. My name is Doyle Buehler, and we're an on-demand collective of professional transformation talent that is rocking the boat on the wave of disruption. This is the DIGITALIZE series, where our panel looks at the arc of digitalizing companies and putting them on a digital-first path. And so I'm delighted to be joined by our guest, Sandy Kemsley, founder and BPM architect of Kemsley Design Limited. From Toronto, Sean Moffitt, managing director, Wikibrands, also from Toronto, and I'm your host, Doyle Buehler, all the way from Australia. And just a quick introduction, Sandy, would you like to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Doyle. I have my own independent consulting company, and I help companies with digital automation typically. So it's looking at business process management and other types of automation that they're bringing into their business, and helping them with the technical architecture, but also how it fits into their business.
Fantastic. Some exciting stuff that you're doing as well, and hopefully we'll get into that. And Sean, the man, the co-host, the guy with the nice haircut.
I always feel like this is a wrestling build-up when we do this, Doyle. But hello, everybody. I'm very interested in this webcast and the one that follows, because as much as I love technology and I love transformation, increasingly what I'm finding is there's a people aspect to both of those things that are coming up. So I'm really kind of curious what's going on today. I'm managing director of Wikibrands, and so we focus on transformation all the time.
Excellent. So cool. So welcome to the program, Sandy, and of course, Sean. So today our panel looks at some things that Sandy talked about earlier, automation, AI, and we're going to sort of hopefully touch in on the impact of work as well. So who wants to start? What's the big deal with automation, AI, and the impact on work?
Well, I can kind of get that kicked off. It's just there's so much stuff that happens. We've been doing automation in business for a long, long time. And obviously we can go back to automation in mechanical type businesses, assembly lines and so on. But I really look at automation with knowledge businesses. So I'm typically working with customers like financial services or insurance companies that have people working away at paper type businesses, and these are the things that we're looking at now. But what was interesting is there was a study done probably about 5 years ago now, or a little more, by a couple of researchers, and they looked at what jobs were likely to be automated, and they did a study, and there were several hundred job categories that they ended up going through, which came from I think a US government list of job categorizations. And they went through and they published the likelihood that these jobs would be automated. And then somebody, of course, did a website out of it called willrobotstakemyjob.com. And you can go on there and you can put in the name of a job or a job role and figure out what's going to happen, or what's the likelihood that your job is going to be automated, over the next several years. And it's really interesting as we look at the things that are likely to be automated or not. Were the things that are probably not going to be automated, or the things that take some amount of design or creativity or decision making that can't really be readily automated. So we are still in part with automation looking at that lower hanging fruit. I don't want to say the low hanging fruit, a lot of that's been taken up, but the lower hanging fruit of things where there's some relatively straightforward process and decisions that have to be done that can be automated in the same way every time. But people are still going to be doing those things that need some unique flavor as to how they're done, and some human intelligence in order to do them.
So that could make it a little bit interesting. So is this line going to be moving up then in terms of putting more people out of work, or onto the beach, or onto a holiday program, or what?
Well, hopefully on the beach for sure, but I think it's really going to change the kind of work that we do. There will be less people doing the repetitive work, the things, assembly line type of things. Even like I work, as I said, in more knowledge industries, but instead of being like, okay, I'm going to take this piece of paper and type some information from it, instead I will be helping a customer solve a problem on a phone. So it will be more about getting people into knowledge and decision management and helping customers than it will be to just do standard, okay, copy and paste this thing from one place to another.
Interesting. Sean, what do you think? What are your views here?
Well, I find there to be so many paradoxes in the space. Like, I find that we're going to get people out of jobs. No, we're going to augment their jobs because we're going to get rid of the bad stuff that makes you groan. Leadership won't be important because we'll all be self-managed organizations based on technology and automation. No, we need great CEOs that need to be resilient and kind of align organizations. So I find I think there's still some chapters to be written in this book, Doyle, in terms of where this is going to go. But I think you even asked it in our last webcast, where is that line? Like, where are we? And I think, you know, in a historical context, this has happened, as Sandy said, in mining and agriculture and manufacturing. We've automated a lot of that. I think this is an interesting technology because we're dealing with different workforces and industries and types of people that probably have been insulated from technology. Sure, we've all had to learn how to use Microsoft Windows or, you know, do a few of the elemental type of things around automation and technology. Now I think the true questions, certainly over the next decade, will be how do we operate alongside technology in a way that A, ethically doesn't make us feel shallow, and B, makes us much more efficient as people that are working for companies.
Well, it's got to be a good thing though, right? Like, let's be honest here. Will it give us sort of the time to be more intellectual and use sort of that mental skills that we have, or will it kind of progress us to be more lazy than we already are?
Well, maybe there's some of each, Doyle. It's like, I think that definitely it gives the opportunity for people who want to do more of the knowledge work, the things where you're thinking about what you're doing rather than just the automaton type stuff. It's definitely, there's growth in that area. I think there will also be huge swaths of jobs and industries where the people who work in them now just don't have the opportunity to reskill for new types of jobs. So there does need to be some sort of social safety net in place to take that up. And I think that in some countries that's in place. There's even things like a minimum income programs going on, and certainly pilots going on. But in other cases, I think that there's going to be some difficulties for people who are not able to move on as their jobs get automated.
So what is this going to look like? Like, let's go ahead 10 years from now, 2029, what will work look like for people?
It's funny. I just in advance, I was clicking around late last night after I came back home from an industry event, and I was clicking around. I saw AMC and iRobot. Will Smith was in this movie about how robots have become like these helper people in the year 2035. So my answer may be very dystopic based on having seen an hour of the movie last night. But I think I'll mention a couple of things. I'm very curious to know what Sandy thinks 10 or 11 years out, because I do think there is a dividing line where you start to get into some really, really sticky questions around, okay, what is the role of work in our lives, right? Once technology gets smart enough to actually replicate a few of the things that we think are really just at the domain of human kind of stuff. We're already seeing it now with natural language processing and the fact that, you know, leading edge AI can probably interpret our words better than kind of a translator that's probably, you know, stressed and probably working on a kind of a deadline. So three things. Do I have three things about what work's going to look like in 2030? I think we won't be working as long as we do now. I probably work a 50 to 60 hour week. It's probably based on choice and being an entrepreneur. I think generally those types of activities that will still be in the wheelhouse of this is only what humans can do technology, we just won't need as much of it. I think there'll be less work involved in terms of human involvement. We've taken, you know, the average week right now is something like 32 hours of our week is spent going through our email or being in meetings. If you look at just those two things, you know, automation and AI make a lot of those things go away. So I think we just won't need as much. I think there will be this, how do you earn income, to Sandy's point? There are going to be professions that are going to be way in demand and will probably be overcompensated based on their need to drive the economy forward. And there are going to be a whole bunch of other industries that if you're a retail salesperson, if you're a truck driver, if you're in any kind of thing that is much more manual or physical labor, my hope is we're going to get governments ready to actually have kind of a social safety net or something to look at some of those unemployment levels. So I think there is going to be this inequality of outcome for people. And I think as well, we'll, just from a philosophical standpoint, I think we'll get much more comfortable using automation. We're already doing it at home with Google Home or Alexa. I think in the workplace environment, there's going to be a measure of comfort that, yeah, you know what, I'm very happy to have my mail delivered to me by drone, or something along those lines. So those are my three for starters, but I'm curious to know what you guys think.
Awesome, thanks. Sandy, what do you think?
Well, I don't think it's as much of a divide as Sean is representing. Like I do think that the email and meetings are actually, maybe not the email, but the meetings, those are things that are going to continue to happen. And those are the things where you may want to have people involved, where you need to have face-to-face communication in order to move something forward. And if in terms of the work, the number of hours we work every week declining, that's been happening for probably a few hundred years, where we've gone from where people worked constantly until they died to where people had the idea of a retirement and a shorter work week. And now we're getting a shorter, even shorter work week, and a maybe an earlier exit from the workforce as well. I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing, but it will impact financially how people live and what they need in order to live. Now, hopefully with the automation that we have, is you mentioned, Sean, things like Alexa Home and so on, with having or Alexa and Google Home, is that we will have the ability to do more automation and do more with less with our home finances as well as business finances. The whole point of businesses bringing in automation is that one of the points of them bringing in automation is to reduce costs. And if we can look at how automation in our daily lives also reduce costs, then maybe we need less. Maybe we don't have to worry about working 60 hours a week in order to make a decent wage so we can pay the rent and so on, if there could be other efficiencies in there. But I just think that there's a lot of social change coming that has to go around that. Definitely, people's jobs are going to change, and for the most part, there will be some that will be that will just completely vanish. And we're seeing things that where we've gone from having business processes, like, I've been working in business process management for a long time, like 25 years. And when we started, it was the data entry clerks who were put out of work at that time. And some of them reskilled to do other things within their organization. So I did work at that time, for companies like pension funds and mutual fund companies and so on. And the people whose job was to take a piece of paper and type in the content from the paper into a computer system, a lot of that started to go away as forms went online and customers were doing self-service and those types of activities. So they had a choice at that point, is did they look at reskilling and doing something else within their same industry? Did they look at going off and doing something completely different in a different industry? Or did they retire if they were at a certain age? And there has to be the ability for them to make those kind of shifts in what they do if we're taking away the job that they have.
Yeah, no, very interesting. So do you think like education will change as well with automation and AI and that sort of thing?
Oh, definitely. It's just like it's back to the kinds of jobs that are likely to be automated and not. Education has to adapt so that people are ready to deal with automation and also ready to deal with just how their work could change. You don't necessarily have somebody training to do something and doing the exact same job their entire life. It's their entire work life. They may go through several careers now in the course of their lifetime where they completely change what they do because technology changes or society changes or the need for the kind of job that they had changed. So that the biggest thing I think that education needs to do is teach people to be constantly learning and constantly able to adapt to new situations because their job might just go away.
Might depend on it. Yeah, there was an interesting story. I think it might have actually been a comedian, but he said 30 years ago when he went through school, the only course that has really helped him has been the typing course.
Yeah. We were all glad
and
for
now
that.
that's going away, right?
Yeah. Well, now we can just talk.
As we dictate. Exactly. But yes, I'm very
Yeah.
happy for that grade 9 typing course that I took, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
I got a little bit of a bugaboo on this, Doyle, because and it's in case, because it almost feels, education almost feels like there's a start line and a finish line, and when you get on the other side, you'll be this fully minted person that will be presentable to the world. And I use the word learning a lot now, because I think learning implies that it's continuous, that it's always going on. And to Sandy's point, you know, for most professions, I think if you aren't relearning your craft every 3 to 5 years, you're probably going to be increasingly irrelevant, right? If you're a doctor, I'm guessing, I'm not a doctor, I only play one on TV, but I think, you know, if you're not keeping up with the practices, it's very obvious there that, you know, people may die. I think in the business world, it's less clear, but I think that clarity is going to be the case in the future. And I think there's a big role for companies to step up and go, look, I know we might have sent people to universities before and expected them to come into our workplace as being kind of functional employees. I think there's a much bigger role for companies to play in terms of, I need to reskill my workers for the next phase of whatever we're going through.
Yeah, but not everybody can be doctors too, right? Like we have to have a wide range of skills and people just that sort of have that affinity to be brain surgeons and that sort of thing. So not everybody's going to benefit necessarily from that type of thing either, because they're, again, not everybody has the skills to be a brain surgeon.
Well, I think everybody has the skills to do something, and it's a matter of finding a match between a person's aptitude and what they'd like to do, and and what kind of jobs are out there for them.
So we're talking low skilled jobs then, typically, or not necessarily?
No, I think there's people who are in high-skilled jobs who totally reinvent their career because something changes. So you have somebody who maybe works in IT in a certain industry, and then that industry moves offshore for whatever reasons, and they have to reskill to address a different industry or a different niche of technology. That happens all the time.
I will give you this, Doyle, to your point about not all of us can be doctors. I think there is a broader view of what will still be viewed as valuable in the future, but I think it's narrowing. I do think it's narrowing. I think there are people that will have deep expertise like doctors or people at the leading edge of their professions. I think there are people that will be very creative. So I think the role of artists and musicians and designers and a whole bunch of people that can actually rethink things that computers can't will have a big role. And there's probably a relationship thing here too, where computers, based on most movies I've seen, aren't really the best relationship people. So if you're a nurse or a certain type of nurse, or taking care of the elderly, or being any part of kind of the social economy, I think that'll be a heightened role as well. But if you're looking at physical labor and you love to do stuff as part of your job in physical labor, or as in something that's more routinized, like where are you going to find your employment in the future? That'll be challenging.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've been looking at, I love that, will robots take my job? So registered nurses, 1% chance. Doctors actually aren't on the list. Lawyers are 4% chance of losing their job. Marketers
probably higher of losing their dog, but
market research, Sean, is about 64%. So
yeah, good. I mean, we don't need more researchers. We need more insiders and foresighters.
Yeah, I was just going to say more people telling the insights from the data. So we talked about all the people and the jobs and that sort of thing. What should companies be doing to build a workforce that works alongside the technology, so that we're prepared and so that we're ready? Like, what can businesses do now, or should they even worry about it?
Well, you get into what the businesses want to do, and you're talking about different levels of people within the business. It's when I talk to my customers that I work with, they're typically large enterprises, and they have people at the top level, the executive management, who have very specific concerns. They're like, well, we're trying to maximize revenue and minimize costs, and those little people down at the bottom, well, okay, they're kind of expendable. And then you get down into some of the management layers and the line managers, and they realize that you need to build teams and and foster growth within people, or else you're going to have a lot of turnover, and that's going to cause problems in terms of being able to have people available to do the job. So I think that you can't talk about businesses as having just one opinion about this, because the opinion will be based a lot on the level that the person is within the organization. We do need to look at getting some sort of, I don't want to say loyalty back to companies, but it's that companies and business and companies and the people who work for them, it would be much better if they had a better relationship than they do in a lot of scenarios now. Like what happens now is you have automation come in, and then there's just mass layoffs, and the companies, I'm sure they do think about that, the layoffs that happen, but they're not necessarily doing anything to kind of mitigate that. They might just say, well, okay, on your way out the door, we'll give you a bit of career counseling. Well, what if they looked at ways in which those people could be reskilled and used within the business? And maybe that's not everybody, but there are definitely opportunities to look at how you can grow people within your own organization rather than just hiring in people that already have skills. It's like you're balancing off the history that people have with an organization against the skill level that they have, and when does it make sense to help to train somebody up to take a new role versus when does it make sense to just bring somebody in at that skill level.
Yeah, no, for sure. Sean, what do you think?
I'm going to sound like Gordon Gekko here in the 80s. Greed is good. Well, I think a lot of like accountants and CFOs out there think automation is good. We will have less cost. We will be faster. And I don't blame them. The most secure tie to the benefit of automation is, yeah, we're going to be faster and quicker and save costs, right? Most of the case studies you see written up on automation go down that path. So I think two things. One, companies got to focus on the top line as well. Like, why do we even exist as a company? So can I improve the customer experience? Can I improve the employee experience? Can I improve the way I make my products? Can I retool what my business model actually is? Because I think those companies in the long run will be the winners. And so, sure, you can save a bit of cost here and there. I think the facts, and Sandy, you may bear this out, sometimes when you introduce a lot of automation, you end up having to hire more employees in the short term. So you don't realize the benefits of automation until maybe the second, the third, the fourth year, when it starts to actually become a thing inside a company. So I think the quick win automation is kind of fool's gold. But I do think companies need to focus on, how do I improve experience and business models? But I think there's a big factor here too, and I don't want to sound, this is not a political statement, but I do think governments have a role to play in terms of how automation regulates itself inside companies, and how companies probably have more of a responsibility than just driving their own profit in the economy of 2020.
Well, what's interesting is that automation, the goal for automation now is really, okay, the efficiency needs to be there. That's sort of table stakes. But now it's about, how can automation improve the customer experience? And you think about, if you have a process that's automated, when a customer initiates a transaction and it's automated so that it happens sooner and it happens in a more consistent way, you have a better customer experience because they get what they want faster and more consistently out of that. It's not always the case, but there is definitely, what I'm seeing now is those drivers are starting to come in rather than just the efficiency argument. And if you're taking more people after you do automation than you did before, then you're not doing it right, and you should probably talk to somebody like me about that.
Well, I think it's funny though. Like we talked about this in a last webcast where Walmart tried to do what Amazon Go has done in terms of this kind of cashierless society. I mean, this is where we'll probably end up. And what they had to do was scrap the operation 2 years in, because they had to introduce so much human labor to control, in quotes, crime, the human element of people just walking out of the store with product, right? And so it became not economical for them to introduce it across their, how many, 50,000, 500, I don't even know how many stores Walmart has. And so I think sometimes we think automation is just going to make everything hum and do things great, and then it has this knock-on effect that causes you to introduce more cost, more people, more whatever into the system. That might be an extreme example, but I think we've seen a lot of companies introduce automation where the short-term effects is, well, man, now we need to hire like a community manager, or now we need to hire somebody else that we weren't doing before. So it's the exciting part of it, because it is focused on, well, now we need to look at new solutions and new benefits, but it's also the awkward part of automation at times, I think.
No, for sure. And so I just stepping back to who's the driver here? Like, is it push pull? Is it the end customer? Is it just businesses developing new technology? Like, who is the ultimate driver of automation?
I think it's a little of both. It's definitely the automation that's being driven by efficiency is something that's come out of the businesses themselves. So they've said, well, we have to have ways to make things more efficient. This was no different than bringing in assembly lines for manufacturing, right? It's like we have to make this more efficient. We have to reduce the costs and so on. And that was certainly the beginning of where all of this came. If we looked at the 80s and 90s in knowledge industries as workflow and business process management and other sort of automating technologies came into knowledge businesses. But I think now is we are seeing this driven by customer demand. So the customers are saying, well, I need to have self-service. I want instantaneous responses. You start looking at the things that customers want as they're dealing with companies, and those all require automation, because you're not going to have self-service without automating the process that goes behind the self-service as a customer's working at a website to kick off some kind of transaction. And you're not going to have a fast response and a consistent response, again, unless you're looking at how do you automate the processes behind that. So we are starting to drive towards having something that's not just about the efficiency, the internally driven efficiency. It's really about this externally driven competitive differentiation. And that's why I don't think regulation is going to work here, because customers are saying, well, no, we want it faster and we want it more consistent and we want to do self-service. So don't take away the automation, because I'm just going to go to somebody else who can provide that level of service.
But would it be a function of the customer actually asking, or the businesses trying to be more competitive to get more customers, the ultimate goal here?
Well, customers don't ask, in the same way that the pre-Henry Ford customers didn't ask for a car, they asked for a faster horse.
Yeah.
The customers are going to look at the businesses that are doing something in a more competitive way, and they're going to move to those businesses. They're going to be doing their shopping online, or their, whatever it is that they want to do in a way that suits their lifestyle and their way of doing things. So they will move towards the companies that have the competitive differentiators for them. And many of those are being driven by automation behind the scenes.
Cool. Sean?
I think I'm going to invoke Marshall McLuhan here, our famed Canadian media philosopher. He called it about 50 years ago, 55 years ago now. It's like the age of automation is going to be the age of do it yourself, right? So I think you see it now. Like, we just did a survey the other day where we asked customers, what do you want from your brands? And if I'd asked that same question 30 years ago, it would have been quality product, trusted, I know it's going to deliver great performance, right? That doesn't even show up on the top 10 anymore. What they want is smarter. What they want is intelligent. Interestingly, the second thing behind smarter and intelligent is we want things to be more authentic and human. So sometimes those two are, humans want everything, right? But I do think the fact that they're answering that question differently suggests that this is probably proportionately more driven by customer demand. I'll use Slack as a great example, where companies tended to spend a lot of time doing emails. You guys have probably worked in corporate environments before. It's like the chain email where everybody has to add their own 2 cents or comment on how great their boss is. Well, now Slack's just gone away with that, right? And Slack is really, the success of Slack is really predicated on what consumers were using in their regular day-to-day lives, whether it was Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever. So it's a clear case of, you know what, I don't want to compromise what I do in my work place scenario. Why can't we just have the same level of design and connection and fluidity that I get by using whatever favored kind of messaging tool I use in my regular life? So I do think it's more driven by customer demand. To Sandy's point, smart companies will get it and will not start trying to introduce faster horses. They will, try to introduce the car of automation.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So just in closing then, Sandy, what would sort of be your advice for the future worker, business and government to get all past, put all these pieces together? What would you suggest?
Well, certainly for the worker, it's going to be about be ready for change, be ready for constant change. Your job's going to change, accept that, and take on some new skills. Start looking at things that where you can use human intelligence to do things, because the automation is going to take away the things that are just about the day-to-day standardized routine type of work. For companies, I think that the companies are already embracing this, as they know they need to do this both for an efficiency standpoint and also for competitive differentiation. So they're certainly embracing the automation, but I do think that there's an opportunity for them to look at how they can prepare their own workers for changing to skills that can have them be long-term employees, so we can get back this idea that somebody maybe stays with the company longer than 6 months at a time. So we're not doing just a gig economy, as you will. And from the government standpoint, I think there needs to be things like the minimum income pilots and so on. There are going to be people that are going to be put out of work by automation as they move through, especially people who are possibly later on in their career and have done the same job their whole life and don't necessarily have the ability to go back and reskill for a job now.
But what's going to happen to capitalism then? That's another discussion.
Oh my God, it's Marx versus Keynes here. Is that the debate we're having? Like, man, these debates and webcasts are getting so highbrow now, Doyle.
Okay, sorry. So Sean, yeah, what your final advice, and then I think you have a couple of things going on too.
Well, I just want to thank Sandy for being on our webcast today too, because I know I'm kind of like the Johnny come lately to this whole world. She's been doing it for 3 decades, and sometimes we overestimate how much change is happening in this very short window of time and totally underestimate how much change is happening over a longer period of time. And Sandy's probably seen that. So I'm humbled and kind of honored to actually have the benefit of your longitudinal wisdom, I guess. So yeah, just Doyle, I know we're not specifically going automation and kind of AI, but we are minting a group of people that are going to be focused on, okay, how does the future of talent, work, and corporate culture change? So similar to what we've done in innovation and growth and branding, this spring we're minting a group of 8 to 12 global experts that are going to be focused on those foresights that we've kind of talked about today, and hopefully root them in some kind of quantitative evidence. We'll be doing a whole bunch of different webinars and events, and hopefully having it pervade into some of the transformation work that we're doing as well. So yeah, we'll direct people to something on Wikibrands' website to talk about what that's happening, and hopefully people listening to this webcast can actually see if they're interested.
Yeah, so wiki-brands.com/webcast, I guess is probably the best starting point.
Yeah, I'll introduce the link when we have it up associated with this webcast.
Yeah, perfect. And Sandy, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, I blog at column2.com, and so I write about the technology and the business and conferences I go to and papers I write and so on. That's probably the best starting point for finding out about.
Is that number 2 or spelled
yep,
2?
The number 2, column 2, the number 2, or I'm on Twitter at @Kemsley.
Okay, cool. I should have had those in advance. Column2.com. There we go. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much. I just want to know when automation will make some sandwiches for me. Any ideas?
It's done already. You can call like Uber Eats and it'll be at your door.
Oh, true. Yeah. But it still takes a human driver to be able to do that. Actually, no, I did see some remote cars that were actually completely automated. The cars from delivery to house.
You want sandwich by drone.
Cool. Yeah, that too. And they actually had to enter the code on the card to open the door to get their dinner out. So
we've covered this, Doyle. Anything Star Trek invented will happen. So Kirk didn't have to worry about which cook was in. There wasn't a Scotty of the kitchen in Star Trek. He just pressed a button.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. All right. So thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Sean. Thanks everybody for watching and listening to the Wikibrands Collective, the digitalized webcast. Go to wiki-brands.com/webcast for more episodes like this on some of our other amazing think tank discussions. Thanks again to our guest, Sandy Kemsley, from the founder and BPM architect of Kemsley Design in Toronto, Sean Moffitt, managing director of Wikibrands, and myself, Doyle Buehler. If you learned something, please like and share, or simply ask us a question and we'll respond as quickly as possible. We have some amazing shows coming up as well on the Wikibrands Collective webcast. Take a look at wiki-brands.com/webcast to find out more. Thank you so much, everybody, and we will see you online.